Hey guys, it's a friendly old buzzard here. Just kind of wanted to give you an update of something I'm doing, kind of a teaser for a longer video I'll make a little later. But I've considered putting a nicer radio, communications radio in my rig for some time. So I'm starting to get all my parts together for it, and I thought I'd show you, what I've assembled so far. And like I say, a little later I'll put a more formal movie together, an installation video on it. But I just wanted to talk to you about a couple of its components before we get too far. Let me start out by saying that I've been using these little Midland Extra Talk radios. They're the GXT model, and they've actually been a really good radio. But they're limited to about 2 watts, and you can't take the antenna off. That's part of the FCC requirements for a FRS GMRS radio. And there'll be people out there that know the finer points of FCC requirements and stuff. But basically, for these little blister pack radios, what were they? They must have been like $40 to $60 for a pair of them, something like that. But limited to 2 watts max, and that's just on a few particular channels. And you can't replace the antenna to get a better antenna with higher gain on it. So I want to be right straight up with you on something, and that is that the radio that I picked is a TYT TH8600, and it is actually not legal to transmit on the FRS GMRS frequencies with this. If you do so, you do it at your own risk. I'm an amateur radio operator, and I have a FCC general license. So if I goof up and do something illegal, I stand to lose both of my licenses. So I want to be upfront and tell you, it is illegal to do the trick that you can do to these little radios in order to make them broadcast on FRS GMRS. I'm not telling you that I'm going to do that, okay? But the reason I picked it is that, well, first off, it's a 25 watt for VHF and 20 watt for UHF radio. It's IP67 waterproof, and I really don't understand why it says IP67 optional. I'm going to have to read up more on that. I understood it was just IP67 rated, which means it's completely protected from dust and protected from water immersion up to 1 meter. So that doesn't mean you can pressure wash it or anything, but it should withstand some splashing. Another reason that I picked this radio is that it's one of the only little radios that I could find that has a 4 watt audio output. Our side-by-sides are pretty loud, and we want to be able to hear and be able to understand what somebody's telling us. And all the other little radios, or at least the vast majority of other mobile radios that I found, only had 2 watt audio amplifiers in it. This has a 4 watt amp and is supposed to be a lot louder, and is kind of almost designed for outdoor sports like our ATV, UTVs things. So that's the reason I picked it. It's about $105 to $130 radio, depending on who you buy it from. One of the harder things to decide on was an antenna. So this being a dual band radio, in fact, there's the radio right there. We'll pick it up and talk about it in a minute. But this being a dual band radio, you'll have to have an antenna that is also a dual band antenna. So this is what I selected. I don't even remember the brand name. It's probably a Chinese model of some sort. I kind of expect this thing to get beat in fairly short order, so I didn't want to pick a real expensive one. But basically there is a choke or a coil right here that for the lower frequencies it allows the radio frequency to be emitted or received by both sections of the antenna. And for the UHF, it only uses the shorter section. The UHF is blocked down here, and that keeps the antenna tuned to be resonant for the frequency band that you're in. The antennas also need to be adjusted. You see these little set screws right here. This little Allen screw. You either lengthen or shorten this section to tune for what they call a standing wave ratio that is on the antenna, and that basically is a measurement of efficiency of how much power is actually being broadcast as opposed to how much wasted energy there is being reflected back into the radio. So there's another set screw down here. So you'll adjust one of them for the VHF and the other for the UHF. It takes a special meter called a standing wave ratio meter, SWR meter, in order to insert between the transmitter and the antenna in order to know what standing wave ratio you have and to be able to tune the antenna. I'm waiting for that. That's part of why I'm not real hurried to do the install. It'll be another week before it actually gets here, but that's required. If you put one of these in, you really need to find a buddy or go to a radio shop or somewhere that has a SWR meter that can tune your antenna for you. So this is the radio. I wanted to give you an idea what size it is. It literally will fit in the palm of the hand. So I'm not exactly sure how to describe how big it is, but you can see it relative to my hand. It's not a real big radio at all. It's fairly plain and simple, not a whole lot of bells and whistles. But you should also know radios like this are not channelized. They're not like a CB where it's channel 1 to 40, not like the FRS. See, what was the FRS? 1 to... Gee, I don't remember even how many channels the FRS uses because I just stay in the lower channels where the higher power is available. But they're not specifically channelized. You have to have a programming cable, which comes with the radio. And, oh, there's the little CD right there. A lot of people don't know these little tiny CDs will actually fit in your CD player. There's a program on here that through the programming cable, what did I do with that? It's sitting there somewhere. Through that programming cable, you're able to input the frequencies that you want to use into that radio. So I don't know, there may be people out there that know what the rugged comm frequencies or race radio frequencies are. They might want to program them up like that. I can't tell you the legality of doing it. I know it's illegal to put the FRS, GMRS frequencies in it. I can't tell you to do that. I can tell you it's possible, but I sure can't tell you to do it. So you have to basically program the radio yourself, and it is kind of a pain in the ass unless you kind of are a computer nerd or something. You might want to think about that part of it. Anyway, so that's a little bit about the radio and everything. Let's pick a different topic now. Okay, wire. I was kind of surprised to learn, being a longtime electrician and electronic tech, I'm kind of surprised to learn that actual pure copper wire is pretty hard to find right now, especially for automotive use. So you want a stranded wire. In fact, the more strands the better, because that makes it more flexible. You can whip it back and forth more times before it breaks, but you want a stranded wire of the appropriate wire gauge to handle the current that you anticipate drawing. And there are charts available for that sort of thing you can look up pretty easily. But I'm a believer in overkill, so I picked 12 gauge, and this is pure copper wire. It is not the Chinese copper-plated aluminum. I'd really advise you to be careful, spend the extra money to get real copper wire. There's a ton of articles on the internet about how the Chinese copper-plated aluminum wire does not actually follow the American wire standard. So it may say it's 12 gauge, but it'll only be good for 12 or 15 amps instead of 20 amps. And of course, the aluminum breaks a whole lot easier than copper does, and it is not resilient to compression. So that was one of the things with aluminum wire burning houses down. You'd tighten it down, but the wire had no resilience, so within just a year or two it was actually loose, would cause a high resistance, and current through a high resistance causes heat, and all of a sudden you had flames. Stay away from the Chinese copper-plated aluminum wire. Next thing I got, I don't know what the official name for this stuff is. I always just called it the Chinese finger torture stuff. It expands out. I know I can get my big finger down there, but I'll be running wires through that to give it some protection so I don't get it caught when I'm going through the roll bars and whatnot. I bought just a cheap little tiny mount just to see if it would work. I still don't know where I'm going to place the antenna on the Maverick. I'd like to get it where the spring is below the roof line so that when I smack this thing on trees and whatnot, I don't hit this part of the coil or the spring. I would like it just to be able to fold back and proceed on through the hazard. Like I say, I know this is going to get torn up, so I didn't buy a real expensive antenna, but there's not too many of them available, especially in the dual band design, that have that spring. I think that was a $39 antenna. There's a whole bunch of different types of mounts. If I remember, this is called an NMO mount. It's the same mount that when I used to do police and fire and whatnot radio, that's the same mount we used to use for all the VHF radios we did for them. It just takes basically, well, if you're doing in a car, you drill a 3/4 inch hole in the roof. This goes up through the roof, and then you see a little rubber gasket there. This goes down on top of that and screws down with that rubber gasket so that you make a waterproof connection into the vehicle. For my purposes on the side-by-side, I'll just be using this mount or something else that I make that has that 3/4 inch hole in it, and I'll have to waterproof the heck out of all this, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I think that's just enough of a teaser. That's about all I wanted to say, just enough to let you know something else is coming. Radio's kind of a second hobby of me. I just got this little HF rig. I've been talking from Washington to California, all the way to the Jersey Shore down into Mexico. That's been kind of fun for a cheap little 20-watt HF radio. And there's a standing wave meter right there for HF. The one that I get for VHF UHF will look similar, but won't be exactly that one. That one's just for 10 to 30 megahertz, something like that. Anyway, hope I didn't swamp you with too much information, but that's my next project, I think. Yeah, you guys take it easy. Bye-bye.